Hey, my name is Brett Bivens. Welcome back to Venture Desktop. Each episode is an exploration of a key thread that I'm picking up on the ground as I think about, invest in, and work with companies that are building the future of work, wellness, media, cities, and industry. Those are the 5 often overlapping megatrends that I care a lot about and where I spend most of my time as an early-stage venture investor at TechNexus. Venture Desktop is not long form, but it is a deep dive focused on highlighting, annotating, and more thoroughly understanding the trends, companies, and people shaping the rapidly changing world that we live in. So if you're interested in these areas or working in these areas as a founder, operator, or investor, I think you'll find the next few minutes very useful. I'd love to connect with you to hear your ideas for the show or to talk about ways that we can work together. You can find me on Twitter at Brett Bivens and can make sure you're first in line for new episodes and updates by signing up at venturedesktop.com. All right, let's jump in. On this episode of Venture Desktop, we are looking at a topic that honestly I'm quite obsessed with and that I think is very foundational to how we should think about economic growth and progress as we look towards the future. And that's the rise of creator-led media companies, which, to give a definition, is a business, large or small, that's first and foremost built around the creative skill set of an individual or a small team. A few examples. So podcasting, you have Pushkin Industries, which is centered around Malcolm Gladwell, or more traditional looking media businesses like The Ringer, centered around the personality of Bill Simmons, or even a company like Glossier, which many people would think of as a product company, but was actually started by Emily Weiss as a side project beauty and grooming blog before expanding into the billion-dollar-plus business that it is today. And this movement at a base level and to a large degree has been enabled by what you might call creative compounding or knowledge compounding. That is the idea that as we continue to decrease the cost of producing and transmitting digital knowledge, we start this virtuous cycle of creation leading to consumption, leading to creation, where new feats and accomplishments that may have seemed impossible, or at the very least were hidden from view from a large segment of the population, come to light. Another way you might think about this idea is society increasing the surface area for the Bannister effect to occur. If you're not familiar, the Bannister effect is based around the story of Roger Bannister, who's the first runner to run a sub 4-minute mile. And after he broke that mark, it opened up the floodgates. Just 46 days after Bannister's feat, another runner broke through the mark. And then just a year later, 3 runners broke the 4-minute mile barrier in a single race. Now, we've been inundated over recent years with the downsides of the transition we're in from information scarcity to information abundance, mostly around the negative impact of social media. This idea of creative compounding is the polar opposite of that. And there are a few examples of this that I really love talking about. The first comes from the world of rock climbing. And there's an incredible piece from economist John Cochrane from earlier this year about this very topic, where he talks about Free Solo, the movie about Alex Honnold's free solo climb of El Capitan, which had never been done before, and which Cochrane considers a conquest of technology. Not technology in the sense of better equipment to help with the climb, but the technology of communication. First, the technology of print and media, and now the technology of the internet. Each new idea in rock climbing becoming more accessible quickly all over the world, which accelerates communal knowledge and accomplishment. There's also basketball. Youth and high school basketball in particular, where the current crop of players coming into the NBA now has been called the YouTube generation, since so many of the skills and mannerisms that they've picked up have been influenced significantly by access to videos of NBA players playing their craft. And the company in this space that's fascinated me for some time and has been at the forefront of understanding this has been Overtime. Now, for the uninitiated, Overtime is essentially a mobile sports content network focused on high school and college athletes, many of whom already have hundreds of thousands of followers and are smarter than ever about how they build their own brands. And so you get these young, digitally native fans flocking to the platform to become early adopters, essentially, of these athletes. Now, Dan Porter, the company's founder and CEO, described recently why this model has worked so well for the company in a Recode interview.
Games. And I've understood for a while that the desire to watch people who are far better than you compete at playing these games is a meaningful desire, and that our audience isn't like, well, that's on a keyboard and that's on a field, so one is true and one is false. They enjoy it, and it's sports. And so I set out to do that as part of what we're doing once we got to be mature in other sports.
And in that context, he's talking about gaming, relating that to the work that they've already done in basketball. But the idea holds true across all these different creative categories. How do you help people see others do what they love better than them so that they become inspired to go out and do it themselves in a better way? The company itself has created a really interesting fire hose of creative compounding where now every dunk you see on the overtime feed from some 16-year-old somewhere in America would have won the NBA dunk contest 20 years ago. And I think this is one of the most amazing applications of kind of this concept and one that I love talking about all the time. But pulling back a little bit from sports, how do we start applying this concept at a practical level to drive growth? And where are the company creation and investment opportunities in the space? To start, there's a topic I want to focus on called creative density. And there's an interesting analogy here to density within cities that's worth looking at. David Perel of North Star Media discussed this recently on the North Star podcast. Great interview with Samo Berja that we'll listen to here very quickly to get a sense for what that means.
And it basically looked at just New York, San Francisco, and San Jose. And it looked at the case that these economists made was that if housing restrictions were lifted just in those three cities, the economy in those cities would have gone up by 36.7%, and then the knowledge would diffuse to the rest of society, and GDP in America would be up something like 3.6%, which is a crazy claim to make, basically saying that cities are the biggest bottleneck that we have in society, and because we have housing restrictions such as minimum apartment sizes and restrictions that make it very hard to build new homes, we're not getting people into cities, which is slowing growth and progress.
Until recently, the bottleneck to truly unlocking creative compounding for creator-led media businesses has been the lack of full stack professional infrastructure available to support those companies, and ranging from the legal and the financial to proper creation and distribution tools. And Balaji Srinivasan recently called this the Adobe Creative Suite for influencers, and I really like that concept because the lack of this Adobe Creative Suite for influencers, for creators, has had the effect of pushing people back inside the four walls of a company that they're not the ones who created it, capping both their creative flexibility and upside, or forcing them to try to build their business on top of platforms that are more focused on seeing value accrue to the platform than on offering tools to help creators capture value from their own networks. In both cases, creators were forced into economic structures that really handicap their ability to do their best work and deliver the most value to the people who really truly care about what they have to say, what they have to show, what they have to write. And that slows down this compounding knowledge flywheel that we've discussed. But this is changing across categories. And to get a sense for some of the areas where this is changing, I highly recommend checking out Li Jin's post on the passion economy, sort of become the canonical essay in this category, where she provides some great examples across markets, everything from podcasts to writing to education, all these different types of work where this is playing out. And I'd add, other categories in here as well, jumping over to a post that I wrote a few months ago. We see a big opportunity here in areas like music and fitness and wellness, categories that may have been looked at as trivial from a digital tooling perspective a few years ago, but which are absolutely exploding. Now, to tie a bow on this, there remains a huge opportunity for companies to start by building a differentiated tool set for a specific group of creators before leveling up to provide a more aligned network through which creators can gain targeted distribution and develop real lasting relationships with their followers. Now, in a twist on the popular phrase, these creators are now seeking out the tools that help them build their own networks, and the impact of this transformation really remains in its early days. All right, so that's everything for creator-led media businesses. Now jumping to a quick hit section at the end here that I call rereadables, retweetables, relistanables. Probably needs a better name, but basically we're inundated with new content, new blog posts, trending tweets, podcasts that hit the top of our feed. But these things often have a shelf life that's shorter than it should be. So here we jump back in time, a few news cycles or a few years to pull out some gems that you may have missed. And so here we go. First with rereadables, two this week that I think relate to the overall topic. One from Mercedes-Benz at Lightspeed Venture Partners and one from Jamira Herrera at Cowboy VC, who both wrote about the future of work, how they frame the market, what they're seeing on the ground working with companies, and probably most importantly, how they hope to see work evolve to meet changing demands of the workforce. In both cases, coming back to this idea of creator-led media businesses, the essays do a great job of putting that in the context of those themes and into the context of the broader work market. Next up, re-listanables, my podcast recommendation goes back to the very beginning of this episode. It's one of my favorite podcasts of the last few years. It features Recode's Kara Swisher talking to Emily Weiss of Glossier. Again, one of the most successful creator-led media companies, maybe the most successful of this generation. Emily started Into the Gloss, a blog about women's beauty and grooming, as a side project while she had a full-time job at Vogue. And in the 9 or so years since, has led the company to a valuation well north of $1 billion with one of the most passionate global customer bases of any brand on the market. Highly recommend you go check that out. You can find that link in the show notes. And then final one here, retweetables. Every week or so, I see a new Twitter question from an investor or somebody following the market involved in the technology space asking about the podcasting ecosystem. And you've probably heard me talk a lot about it, tweet a lot about it. It's an ecosystem that's becoming quite central to the creator-led media revolution. And in every case, I think the best place for them to start is this one specific Twitter thread by investor Dave Ambrose on podcasting. Recommend you go start here as well. Fire up a quick retweet for Dave, and we'll close up the show. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me again on Venture Desktop. Look forward to doing this again. If you want to stay up to date, come find me on Twitter at Brett Bivens or head to venturedesktop.substack.com to subscribe to the newsletter and get all the links that I go through during the show in your inbox. Thanks again, and talk to you soon.